Chapter 8. By the river. Siddharth walked through the forest, was already far from the city, and knew nothing but that one thing, that there was no going back for him, that this life, as he had lived it for many years until now, was over and done away with, and that he had tasted all of it, sucked everything out of it until he was disgusted with it. That was the singing bird he had dreamt of. That was the bird in his heart. Deeply he had been entangled in sansar. He had sucked up disgust and death from all sides into his body. Like a sponge sucks up water until it is full. And full he was. Full he was feeling of being sick in it. Full of misery, full of death. There was nothing left in this world which could have attached him, given him joy, given his comfort. Passionately, he wished to know nothing about himself anymore, to the rest to be dead. If there only was a lightning bolt to strike him dead, if there was only a tiger to devour him, if there was only a wine, a poison, which would numb his senses, bring him forgetfulness and sleep, and no awakening from that. Was there still any kind of filth he had not soiled himself with, a sin or foolish act he had not committed, a dreariness of the soul he had not brought upon himself? Was it still at all possible to be alive? Was it possible to breathe in again and again, to breathe out, to feel hunger, to eat again, to sleep again, to sleep with a woman again? Was this cycle not exhausted and brought to a conclusion for him? These all were in question marks. Siddharth reached the large river in the forest, the same river over which a long time ago, when he had still been a young man and came from the town of Gautam, a ferryman had conducted him by this river. He stopped hesitantly and stood at the bank. Tiredness and hunger had weakened him. And whatever for should he walk on, wherever to which goal? No, there were no more goals. There was nothing left but the deep, painful yearning to shake off this whole desolated dream, to spit out of this stale wine, to put an end to this miserable and shameful life. A hand bent over the bank of the river. A coconut tree. Siddharth leaned against his trunk with his shoulder, embraced the trunk with one arm, and looked down in the green water, which ran and ran under him. Looked down and found himself to be entirely filled with wish to let go, to drown in these waters. A frightening emptiness was reflected back at him by the water, answering to terrible emptiness in his soul. Yes, he had reached the end. There was nothing left for him except to annihilate himself, except to smash the failures into which he had shaped his life, to throw it away before the feet of mockingly laughing goods. This was the great vomiting he had longed for. Death, the smashing to bits of the form he hated. Let him be food for fishes, this dog Siddharth, this lunatic, this depraved and the rotten body, this weakened and abused soul. Let him be food for fishes and crocodiles. Let him be chopped to bits by the demons. With a distorted face, he stared into the water, saw the reflection of his face, and spit at it. In deep tiredness, he took his arm away from the trunk of the tree and turned a bit in order to let himself fall straight down, in order to finally drown. With his eyes closed, he slipped towards that. Then out of remote areas of his soul, out of the past times of his now weary life, a sound stirred up. It was a word, a syllable, which he, without thinking, with a slurred voice, spoke to himself, the old word which is the beginning and the end of all prayers, the Brahmins, the holy Om, which roughly means that what is perfect or the completion. And in the moments when the sound of Om touched Siddharth's ear, his dormant spirit suddenly woke up and realized the foolishness of his actions. Siddharth was deeply shocked. So this was how things were with him. So doomed was he, so much he had lost his way and was forsaken by all knowledge, that he had been able to see death, that this wish of a child had been able to grow in him, to find rest by his body. But all agony of these recent times, all sobering realizations, all desperation had not brought about. This was brought on by this moment. When the Om entered in his consciousness, he became aware of himself in his misery and his error. Om, he spoke to himself, Om, and again he knew about Brahman, knew about the indestructibility of life, knew about all that is divine, which he had forgotten. But this way, only a moment flash, by the foot of the coconut tree, Siddharth collapsed, struck down by the tiredness, mumbling Om, placed his hand on the root of the tree, fell into a deep sleep. Deep was his sleep, and without dreams for a long time, he had not known such a sleepy anymore. When he woke up after hours, he felt as if 10 years had passed. He heard the water quietly flowing. He did not know where he was and who had brought him here. Opened his eyes, saw with astonishment that there was trees and the sky above him, and he remembered where he was and how he got here. But it took him a long while for this, and the past seemed to him as if it had been covered by a veil. Infinitely distant, infinitely far away, infinitely meaningless, he only knew that his previous life, in the first moment when he thought about it, this past life seemed to him like a very old previous incarnation, like an early pre-birth to his present self. That his previous life had been abandoned by him, that full of disgust and wretchedness, he had even intended to throw his life away. But that by a river under a coconut tree, he has come to his senses. The holy word Om on his lips has come to his senses. The holy word Om on his lips, that he had fallen asleep and had now woken up and was looking at the world as a new man. Quietly he spoke the word Om to himself, speaking which he had fallen asleep, and it seemed to him as if his entire long sleep had been nothing but a long meditative recitation of Om, a thinking of Om, and submergence and completely entering into Om, into nameless and the perfected. What a wonderful sleep had this been, never before by sleep. He had been thus refreshed, thus renewed, thus rejuvenated. Perhaps he had really died and drowned and was reborn by a new body, but no, he knew himself. He knew his hand and his feet, knew the place where they lie, knew his self in his chest, the Siddharth, the eccentric, the weird one. But this Siddharth was nevertheless transformed, was renewed, was strangely well rested, strangely awake, joyful, and curious. Siddharth straightened him up. Then he saw a person sitting opposite to him, an unknown man, a monk in a yellow robe with a shaven head, sitting in the position of pondering. He observed the man, who had neither hair on his head nor a beard, and he had not observed him for long. When he recognized this monk as Govinda, the friend of his youth, Govinda had taken his refuge with the exalted Buddha. Govinda had aged too. He too, but still his face bore the same features, expressed zeal, faithfulness, searching, timidness. But when Govinda, now sensing his gaze, opened his eyes and looked at him, Siddharth saw Govinda did not recognize him. Govinda was happy to find him awake. Apparently, he had been sitting here for a long time and been waiting him to wake up. though he did not know him. I have been sleeping, said Siddharth. However, did you get here? You have been sleeping, answered Govinda. It is not good to be sleeping in such places where snakes often are and the animals of the forest have their path. O sir, I am follower of the Exalted One, the Buddha, the Sakyamuni, and have been on a pilgrimage together with several of us on this path. I saw you lying and sleeping in a place where it's dangerous to sleep. Therefore, I sought to wake you up. O sir, and since I saw that your sleep was very deep, I stayed behind from my group and sat with you. And then, so it seems, I have fallen asleep myself. I who wanted to guard your sleep badly, I have served you. Tiredness has overwhelmed me. But now that you are awake, let me go to catch up with my brothers. I thank you, Saman, for watching out over my sleep, spoke Siddharth. You are friendly. You followers of the Exalted One, now you may go then. I am going, sir. May you, sir, always be in good health. I thank you, Saman. Govinda made a gesture of salutation and said farewell. Farewell, Govinda, said Siddharth. The monk stopped. Permitted to me to ask, sir, from where do you know my name? Now Siddharth smiled. I know you, O Govind, from your father's hut and from the school of Brahman and from the offering and from our walk to Saman's and from that hour when you took your refuge with the Exalted One in the grove Jetwan. You are Siddharth, Govinda exclaimed loudly. Now I am recognizing you. I don't comprehend anymore how I couldn't recognize you right away. Be welcome, Siddharth. My joy is great to see you again. It also gives me joy to see you again. You have been guard of my sleep again. I thank you for this, though I wouldn't have required any guard. Where are you going to, O friend? I am going nowhere. We monks are always traveling whenever it is not rainy season. We always move from one place to another, live according to the rules if the teaching passed on to us. Accept the alms, move on. It is like always. But you, Siddharth, where are you going to? On this, Siddharth replied, with me too, friend. It is as it is with you. I am going nowhere. I am just traveling. I am on a pilgrimage. Govinda spoke. You are saying you are on a pilgrimage, and I believe in you. But forgive me, O Siddharth, you don't look like a pilgrim. You are wearing rich man's garment. You are wearing the shoes of a distinguished gentleman, and your hair, and with the fragrance of perfume, is not a pilgrim's hair, not the hair of a Saman. Right so, my dear, you have observed well. Your keen eyes see everything. But I haven't said to you that I was a Saman. I said I am on a pilgrimage. And so it is, I am on a pilgrimage. You are on a pilgrimage, said Govinda, but few would go on a pilgrimage in such clothes, few in such shoes, few with such hairs. Never I have met such a pilgrim, being a pilgrim myself for many years. I believe you, my dear Govinda, but now, today you have met a pilgrim just like this, wearing such shoes, such a garment. Remember, my dear, not eternal is the world of appearances, not eternal anything but eternal are our garments and the style of our hair, and our hair embodies themselves. I am wearing a rich man's cloth. You have seen this quite right. I am wearing them because I have been a rich man. I am wearing my hair like this, worldly and lustful people, for I have been one of them. And now, Siddharth, what are you now? I don't know it. I don't know it just like you. I am traveling. I was a rich man. I am no rich man anymore. And what I'll be tomorrow, I don't know. You have lost your riches? I've lost them, or they me. They somehow happen to slip away from me. The wheel of physical manifestation is turning quickly. Govinda, where is Siddharth the Brahman? Where is Siddharth the Saman? Where is Siddharth the rich man? Not eternal things change quickly, Govinda. You know it. Govinda looked at the friend of his youth for a long time. with doubt in his eyes. For that he gave him the salutation which one used to do for a gentleman and went on his way. With a smiling face, Siddharth watched him leave, and he loved him still. This faithful man, this fearful man, and how could he not have loved everybody and everything in this moment, in the glorious hour after his wonderful sleep filled with Om, this enchantment which had happened inside of him in his sleep. And by means of the Om was this everything that he loved everything, and he was full of joyful love for everything he saw. And it was this very thing, so it seemed to him now, which had been his sickness before, that he had not able to love anybody or anything. With smiling face, Siddharth watched the leaving monk. The sleep had strengthened him much, but hunger gave him much pain. For by now he had not eaten for 2 days, and the times were long past when he had been tough against hunger. With sadness and yet also with a smile, he thought of that time. In those days, so he remembered, he had boasted of three things to Kamla, had been able to do 3 noble, undefeatable feasts: fasting, waiting, thinking. These had been his possessions, his power and strength, his solid staff in the busy, laborious years of his youth. He had learned these 3 feasts, nothing else, and now they had abandoned him. None of them was his anymore, neither fasting, nor waiting, nor thinking. For the most wretched things he had given them up. For what fades most quickly, most sensual lust, for the good life, for riches, his life had indeed been strange. And now, so it seemed, now he had really become a childlike person. Siddharth thought about his salutation and situation. Thinking was hard on him. He did not really feel like it, but he forced himself. Now he thought, since all these most easily perishing things have slipped from me again, now I am standing here under the sun, again just as I have been standing here, a little child. Nothing is mine. I have no abilities. There is nothing I could bring about. I have learned nothing. How wondrous is this! Now that I am no longer young, that my hair is already half grey, my strength is fading, now I am starting again at the beginning as a child. Again he had to smile. Yes, his fate had been strange. Things here going downhill with him. And now he was again facing the world void, naked and stupid. But he could not feel sad about this. No, he even felt a great urge to laugh about himself, to laugh about this strange, foolish world. Things are going downhill with you, he said to himself, and laughed about it. And as he was saying it, he happened to glance at river. He also saw the river going downhill, always moving on downhill and singing and being happy through all. He liked the swell. Kindly he smiled at the river. Was this not the river in which he had intended to drown himself in past times, 100 years ago, or he had dreamt this? Wondrous indeed was my life, so he thought. Wondrous detours it has taken. As a boy, I had only to do with gods and offering. As a youth, I had only to do with asceticism, with thinking and meditation, was searching for Brahman, worshipped the eternal in the Atman. But as a young man, I followed the penitents, lived in the forest, suffered the heat, and forced learned to hunger, taught my body to become dead. Wonderfully soon afterwards, insight came towards me in the form of the great Buddha's teaching. I felt the knowledge of the oneness of the world circling in me like my own blood. But I also had to leave Buddha and the great knowledge. I went and learned the art of love with Kamla, learned training with Kamaswamy, piled up money, wasted money, learned to love my stomach, learned to please my senses. I had to spend many years losing my spirit to unlearn thinking again to forget the oneness. Isn't it just as if I had turned slowly and on one longer detour from a man into a child, from a thinker into a childlike person? And yet, this path has been very good. And yet, the bird in my chest has not died yet. But what path has this been? I had to pass through so much stupidity, though so much vice, though so many errors, through so much disgust and disappointments and woe, just to become a child again and to be able to smart over. But it was right so. My heart says yes to it. My eyes smile to it. I have had to experience despair. I have had to sink down to the most foolish one of all the thoughts, to thought of suicide. In order to be able to experience divine grace, to hear Om again, to be able to sleep properly and to awake properly again, I had to become a fool to find Atman in me again. I had to sin to be able to live again. Where else might my path lead to me? It is foolish, this path. It moves in loops. Perhaps it is going around in a circle. Let it go as it likes. I want to take it. Wonderfully, he felt joy rolling like waves in his chest. Wherever from he asked his heart, where from did you get this happiness? Might it come from that long, good sleep which has done me so good? Or from the word Om, which I said? Or from the fact that I have escaped, that I have completely fled, that I am finally free again and I am standing like a child under the sky? Oh, how good it is to flit, to have become free. How clean and beautiful is the air here. How good to breathe. There where I ran away from, there everything smelled of ointments, of spice, of wine, of excess, of sloth. How did I hate this world of the rich, of those who revel in fine food, of the gamblers? How did I hate myself for staying in this terrible world for so long? How did I hate myself, have deprived, poisoned, tortured myself, have made myself old and evil? No, never again I will. As I used to like doing so much, delude myself into thinking that Siddharth was wise. But this one thing I have done well, this is I must praise. That there is now an end to that hatred against myself, to that foolish and daily life. I praise you, Siddharth. After so many years of foolishness, you have once again had an idea, have done something, have heard the bird in your chest singing, and have followed it. Thus he praised himself, found joy in himself, listening curiously to his stomach, which was rumbling with hunger. He had now, so he felt in this recent time, in days completely tasted and spit out, devoured up the point of desperation and death. A piece of suffering, a piece of misery. Like this, it was good. For much longer, he could have stayed with Kamaswamy, made money, wasted money, filled his stomach, and let his soul die of thirst. For much longer, he could have lived in this soft, well upholstered hell if this had not happened. The moment of complete hopelessness and despair, that most extreme moments when he hung over the rushes water, was ready to destroy himself, that he had felt this despair, this deep disgust, and that he had not succumbed to it. That the bird, the joyful source, and the voice in him was still alive after all. This is why he felt joy. This was why he laughed. This was why his face was smiling brightly under his hair, which had turned grey. This is good, he thought, to get a taste of everything for oneself, which one needs to know that lust of the world and riches do not belong to the good things. I have learned as a child. I have known it for a long time, but I have experienced only now. And now I know it. Don't just know it in my memory, but in my eyes, in my heart, in my stomach. Good for me to know this. For a long time, he pondered his transformation, listening to a bird as it sang for joy. Had not this bird died in him? Had he not felt its death? No, something else from within him had died, something which already for a long time had yearned to die. Was it not this what he used to intend to kill in his ardent years as a penitent? Was this not self, his small, frightened, and proud self? He had wrestled with so many years. He had defeated him again and again, which was back again after every killing, probated joy, felt fear. Was it not this which today had finally come to its death? Here in the forest, by this lovely river, was not due to this death. That he was now like a child, so much full of trust, so without fear, and so full of joy. Now Siddharth also got some idea of why he had fought this self in vain as a Brahman, as a penitent. Too much knowledge had held him back, too many holy verses, too many sacrificial rules, too much self-castigation, so much doing and striving for that goal. Full of arrogance he had been. Always the smartest, always working the most, always one step ahead of all others, always the knowing, the spiritual one, always the priest or the wise one. Into being a priest, into this arrogance, into this spirituality, his self had retreated. There it sat firmly and grew, while he thought he would kill it by fasting and penance. Now he saw that the secret voice had been right, had no teacher would ever have been able to bring about his salvation. Therefore, he had to go out into the world, lose himself to lust and power, to women and money, had become a merchant and dice gambler, a drinker, a greedy person, until the priest and the salmon in him was dead. Therefore, he had to continue bearing these ugly years, bearing the disgust, the teaching, the pointlessness of the dreary and the wasted life up to the end, up to the bitter despair, until Siddharth, the lustful Siddharth, the greedy, could also die. He had died. A new Siddharth had woken up from the sleep. He would also grow old. He would also eventually have to die. Mortal was Siddharth. Mortal was every physical form. But today he was young, was a child. The new Siddharth was full of joy. He thought these thoughts, listened with a smile to his stomach, listened gratefully to a buzzing bee. Cheerfully he looked into the rushing river. Never before he had liked a water so well as this one. Never before he had perceived the voice and the parable of the moving water thus strongly and beautifully. It seemed to him as if the river had something special to tell him, something he did not know yet, which was still awaiting him. In this river, Siddharth was intended to drown himself. In it, old, tired, desperate Siddharth had drowned today. But the new Siddharth felt a deep love for the rushing water and decided for himself not to leave it very soon. Here's the chapter 8 ends, my friends, and tune into another listenings. So, as I already told in the last chapter, that Siddharth's life has taken a twist, and it was really good to know that what he was actually trying to say, that you have to leave the materialistic things from you and go for a new things, go for the new beginnings. Is a deep meaning, and I hope you are getting the meaning. Life is beautiful and one should follow it. Thanks.